The house at the end of Maple Street. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew each other. It wasn't much, but it was home. And every home has its secrets. Ours was the house at the end of Maple Street. It was a beautiful old Victorian house with a massive oak tree in the front yard. The strange thing? No one ever saw the owners. The lights would turn on and off. The curtains would move as if someone was watching, but no one ever came in or out. It was a house frozen in time. One summer, my friends and I dared each other to knock on the door. We were 12, full of bravado but scared out of our minds. My best friend Jake knocked. The sound echoed unnaturally. Silence. Then, the door creaked open on its own. I should have run. We all should have. But curiosity got the best of us. The house was immaculate inside, like a museum. The air smelled of old wood and something faintly metallic. Then we saw it, on the living room table. A steaming cup of tea, untouched, as if someone had just been there. A shadow moved on the stairs. We bolted. Years later, after I moved away, I read a news article. The house had been sold, and during renovations, they found something horrifying. In a hidden basement, behind a false wall, were stacks of old newspapers, each one featuring a missing child from our town. The worst part? The most recent one had been Jake's face. He went missing the week after we entered that house. My sister's diary. My sister Emily died 5 years ago. It was sudden. An accident, they said. A fall down the stairs. But something always felt wrong. Recently, while helping my mom clean out the attic, I found one of Emily's old diaries. I almost put it away, but curiosity won. The first few entries were normal teenage ramblings, boys, school drama, songs she liked. But then I found the last entry. If anything happens to me, it's because of the man in the mirror. Chills ran down my spine. I remembered she had always been afraid of mirrors. When we were kids, she would ask me to cover them at night. That night, I couldn't sleep. Her words haunted me. So I did something stupid. I turned off all the lights and stood in front of my bathroom mirror. At first, nothing. Then, in the darkness, I saw movement behind me. A shadow, tall and thin, with hollow eyes. My blood turned to ice. It smiled. I ran, flipping on every light. The reflection was gone. But on the mirror, in faint smeared letters, were the words, "You shouldn't have looked." The forgotten call. I work as a 911 dispatcher. It's usually routine. Car accidents, medical emergencies, the occasional drunk dial. But one call still haunts me. A woman whispered frantically, "Help me, he's inside." My training kicked in. "Ma'am, where are you?" Silence. Then a chilling whisper. "The closet. He doesn't know I have my phone." I traced the call. It was coming from a house across town. Officers were dispatched immediately. I stayed on the line, but she stopped responding. 10 minutes later, the officers arrived. They found the house abandoned. No signs of forced entry. No signs of struggle. The weirdest part? The number that called me didn't exist. It was unregistered, and there was no phone in the house. A cold case detective later told me something that still gives me nightmares. That house? A woman had been murdered there 10 years ago. Killed by an intruder while hiding in the closet. And her last call for help? It was never connected. The bus that never stops. I take the same bus every night after work. Route 17, the 10:45 p.m. trip. It's usually empty, just me and the driver. But last night, something was different. Halfway home, the driver pulled over at an unmarked stop. A man in a dark suit stepped in. He had no luggage, no phone, just empty eyes. The doors closed, but the bus didn't move. The driver sat there, stiff, as if waiting. The man in the suit turned and looked at me. "Next stop," he said, his voice hollow. I tried to ask where he was going, but the words stuck in my throat. My skin prickled with fear. The bus finally started moving, but I noticed something terrifying. The city outside, wasn't my city. The streets were wrong. The buildings twisted into unfamiliar shapes. The lights outside flickered like dying stars. I ran to the driver. "Stop the bus!" I screamed. He turned to me, his face pale. "I can't." I yanked the emergency stop cord. Nothing happened. The man in the suit stood up. "You don't belong here," he said, tilting his head. "Not yet." The next thing I remember, I was waking up in my bed. My phone said 7 a.m. Had it been a dream? Shaking, I checked my wallet. My bus pass was missing. In its place was a small black ticket. No date, no destination. Just one word: the girl in the yellow raincoat. It started with a missing persons report. I work as a police detective in a small town. Nothing ever happens here. The occasional break-in, bar fights, missing pets. But when Claire Whitmore, a 17-year-old high school senior, vanished without a trace, the entire town went into a panic. She was last seen walking home from school on a rainy afternoon. Her mother said she always wore a bright yellow raincoat on rainy days, a gift from her late father. It was a distinctive color, impossible to miss. But no one saw her after she left school. No witnesses, no leads. It was like she had evaporated into the mist. For weeks, we searched. The woods, the lake, abandoned buildings. Nothing. It became one of those cases that slowly fade into the background. Unsolved, but never forgotten. Then, nearly a year later, I saw her. I was driving home late one night after a particularly exhausting shift. The rain poured down in thick sheets, making it hard to see beyond the windshield. I turned onto Hollow Creek Road, a lonely, wooded path that cut through the outskirts of town. That's when I saw it. A flash of yellow. A girl walking along the side of the road, head down, rain bouncing off her hood. My heart stopped. It was Claire. It had to be. I slammed the brakes and jumped out, my pulse hammering. "Claire?" She didn't react, just kept walking. I ran up to her, gripping her shoulder. "Claire, it's me, Detective Holloway. We've been looking for you." Slowly, she lifted her face. It wasn't Claire. Her skin was pale, too pale. Her eyes, blank, hollow. Her lips parted slightly as if she was trying to speak, but no sound came out. Then, in a blink, she was gone. No sound of footsteps, no sign of movement. Just rain and the distant rumble of thunder. I stood there drenched, heart pounding, questioning my sanity. But I knew what I had seen. The next day, I pulled out Claire's case file. Something gnawed at me, a strange urgency I couldn't explain. I went back to the last place she was seen, her school. I combed through security footage again, something I had done 100 times before. And that's when I saw it. In the footage, Claire is walking out of the building, raincoat zipped up, backpack slung over one shoulder. She waves to a friend and heads toward the road. But then, she stops. She turns, looks directly into the camera. Her lips move, forming a single word. Help. I had never noticed it before. No sound, just the movement of her lips. And then, just like before, she turns away and walks out of frame, disappearing into the storm. I replayed it over and over, a sick feeling growing in my stomach. Why did she look directly into the camera? And why did no one hear her scream for help? That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of her haunted me. Something wasn't right. At 2:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Hollow Creek Road, the old bridge. I felt ice in my veins. Was it a prank? Was someone playing with me? I grabbed my coat, my gun, and my badge and drove straight there. The rain had started again, heavy and relentless. The bridge was barely visible through the fog. And then I saw her. Claire. Standing in the middle of the bridge, her yellow raincoat glowing under the dim streetlight. She looked at me, eyes wide, lips trembling. "Claire?" I stepped forward cautiously. "It's me. You're safe now." Her head shook violently. "No. she whispered. I'm not. A gust of wind howled through the trees. They won't let me go, she choked out. They never let me go. My blood turned to ice. Who? I demanded. Who's keeping you here? Before she could answer, the wind intensified. The rain hammered down in a deafening roar. And then she was gone. Vanished. Like she had never been there. The only thing left was her raincoat, soaked and crumpled on the bridge. I reached down, hands shaking, and picked it up. The moment my fingers touched the fabric, a whisper echoed in my ear. Find them. And then, silence. Claire Whitmore was still missing. But now I knew. She wasn't the only one. And whoever they were, they weren't done.